I was pregnant. But by the time I told my husband, my sister had already claimed the baby as hers, and seduced him with the lie. They say the two pink lines can change your whole life. For me, they changed it twice. First with joy, then with betrayal so cruel it hollowed me out from the inside. My name is Caroline Royce, and this is not just a story about love lost, it's about how my own blood, my sister, cut deeper than any enemy ever could. I remember the exact moment I saw those lines. I was in the upstairs bathroom of our Boston brownstone, shaking with nerves and silent hope. My husband, Mason, was downstairs making Sunday pancakes. He had no idea I was even late. We'd been trying for months after my miscarriage the year before, and I didn't want to tell him until I was absolutely sure. When the lines appeared, I sank to the cold tile floor and wept, relief, gratitude, a kind of fragile joy I hadn't felt in so long. But I wasn't alone. That was the first mistake. My sister, Celeste, had been staying with us temporarily after her third breakup in 2 years. She'd always been the glamorous mess to my sensible soul, dripping with charm, with nowhere else to go. I didn't think twice about letting her in. Why would I? She was my sister. My maid of honor. My childhood protector. That morning, she knocked once, then barged into the bathroom before I could hide the test. "What's going on?" she asked. Her voice was sugary, curious. I smiled through tears and said, "Celeste, I'm pregnant." She blinked once. Twice. Then smiled too wide. "Oh my God, Caro. Wow. That's amazing." But there was something strange in her voice, something tight, like a pulled thread ready to snap. I brushed it off. I was too happy. The test disappeared that night. I searched the bathroom. The trash. The sink. It was gone. I convinced myself I must have thrown it out with the tissues. 2 days later, I came home to the sound of Mason shouting. Not angry. Excited. "You're pregnant," he said, hugging Celeste in the living room. I stood frozen in the doorway. Celeste turned, holding up a test, the test I had taken. "I didn't know how to tell you," she said, eyes shimmering with fake innocence. "It was unexpected." My husband's arms dropped to his sides. You're having my baby?" She nodded. I couldn't breathe. I stared at Mason. "Is this some kind of joke?" He looked between us. "Wait, Caroline, what are you saying?" Celeste jumped in, her voice quivering. "She's just shocked. We made a mistake one night when we were drinking. You were out of town, remember? It was stupid. It meant nothing." Her eyes found mine. "But the baby means something now." My world split in half. Mason didn't deny it. He didn't scream or plead. He just sat down, head in hands. That was all the truth I needed. I didn't scream either. I walked to the guest room, locked the door, and collapsed on the floor. But in that hollow darkness, something inside me began to harden. A voice, cold and clear, whispered, "Don't cry, Caro. Win." So I did what I had to. I saw a doctor privately and confirmed that I was still pregnant, my own child, still growing inside me, real and strong. I said nothing. I played the devastated wife, then the emotionally unstable one. And while Celeste flaunted her fake bump and Mason moved out to be with her, I met with a lawyer. A woman who'd seen betrayal 100 times over and knew how to turn it into leverage. Celeste forged a test. I had proof. I had my real medical records, my true timeline, and most of all, I had patience. I filed for divorce. I cited emotional trauma, infidelity, and mental cruelty. Celeste was served court documents demanding proof of pregnancy under oath. And when the ultrasound date didn't match, the house of cards fell apart. Mason panicked. Celeste screamed. I sat in court in a plain blue dress, hand resting on my real bump, and let the truth detonate like a grenade. The judge sided with me. The assets, our house, savings, even the antique shop I had started with Mason, were awarded to me. Celeste had no job, no money, no claim. Mason had violated the prenup. They were left with nothing. But that wasn't the best part. The best part came when I watched them leave the courthouse, bags in hand, fighting in the rain. I wasn't bitter. I wasn't angry anymore. I was reborn. And to anyone listening, if your own blood betrays you, remember this: sometimes the best revenge is delivered in silence, in strategy, and in full custody of your dignity and your house. If this story broke your heart, even a little, please like, share, and subscribe. And tell me, where are you from, and would you forgive your sister if she did this to you? They moved into a cheap apartment near the South End, not too far from my house, like a sick joke. Celeste decorated it with fake roses and second-hand throw pillows, posting selfies on Instagram of her little family starting fresh. She even used the hashtag #miraclebaby. Meanwhile, I wore dark sunglasses to the grocery store to avoid neighbors who still thought I was the one who got cheated on and cracked. Let them think that. Let everyone think I was the fragile wife who lost everything. It made what I was doing behind closed doors that much sweeter. The first few weeks were hell. I won't lie. I cried into my pillow every night. I kept Mason's sweatshirt folded in my drawer, and sometimes I clutched it like a widow. And I was a widow, in a way, just not of death, but of betrayal. Mason was the man I married after 6 years of friendship, the one who held me through a miscarriage, who painted my studio walls yellow because sunshine helps the soul. I had loved him with every inch of me. And now that same man was sleeping beside my sister, rubbing her belly and whispering sweet lies into the ears of someone who had stolen my life. But grief wasn't the only thing growing inside me. My baby was too. I watched my real bump swell in the mirror each week while Celeste patted hers with soft towels and shapewear. The difference between us? Mine was real, and I had the receipts. Every appointment, every test, every signed affidavit from my OBGYN. Meanwhile, she was faking morning sickness and pretending to need maternity clothes. I knew it wouldn't last long. Lies have a shelf life. And hers was ticking. I sent them a baby gift. Not because I cared. Because I wanted her to feel the heat. A box of tiny booties, an expensive maternity pillow, and a card that simply read, "From the real mother." No signature. She posted about it the next day, trying to make it seem like some sweet fan gift. But I knew it rattled her. She blocked me online after that. Perfect. Let her think I was gone. Let her forget that I still had every piece of evidence, and a shark of a lawyer who specialized in family fraud. And then it happened. Mason called me one evening out of nowhere. I was in bed, cocoa in hand, my bump wrapped in a soft blue blanket. "Caroline," he said, his voice uncertain, I know you probably don't want to talk to me, but something's off." I said nothing. Let the silence work. He continued, "Celeste hasn't had a single checkup. She won't let me come to any appointments. She says I make her nervous. But today I found something. A pack of fake belly padding in the closet." My heart didn't race. It slowed. Cold and steady. Like a sniper taking aim. "Oh," I finally said. "So you're telling me, the woman who seduced her sister's husband by faking a pregnancy might be lying?" He stammered. "Caroline, I swear, I didn't know. I thought it was just a mistake. She told me she was pregnant and scared. I thought maybe we could raise the baby, Mason," I said calmly. "You made your choice. Now you get to live in it." I hung up before he could respond. The next day, my lawyer filed a motion to subpoena Celeste's medical records and verify the pregnancy claim she'd made publicly, since it had been used to manipulate marital assets. Celeste cracked fast. She tried to fake an ultrasound, but the dates didn't match. The court ordered a full exam. She didn't show. A warrant was issued for contempt of court. Mason showed up at my door 2 days later looking like a soaked dog. "Please," he begged. I didn't know she was lying. She said she loved me. She said we could have a family. I stared at him, belly full, soul empty. You already had a family, I said. You just gave it away to a liar in lipstick. I didn't invite him in. That night, as I rocked gently on my glider with one hand on my belly and the other on a mug of tea, I felt my baby kick. It wasn't just a foot. It was a signal. I had lost a husband. I had lost a sister. But I had not lost myself. And I was done crying. They weren't just going to lose me. They were going to lose everything. It was a Thursday morning when I saw the headline that made me drop my spoon into my cereal bowl. The milk splashed onto my robe, but I didn't move. I just stared at the screen like it was fiction. Local couple sued for pregnancy fraud and property deception. The article was short, factual, almost boring in its tone, but to me, it was thunder. They didn't name me. They didn't have to. They used phrases like "the man's ex-wife claims her sister impersonated her pregnancy," and "court records reveal a manipulated timeline surrounding the transfer of marital assets." It was all there. The lie was no longer mine to hold in silence, it was public. Celeste must have read it too, because that afternoon, there was a knock at my door. A frantic, desperate knock. Not the kind of polite tapping you'd expect from a sister trying to apologize. No, this was the thud of someone whose world was collapsing. I opened it, slowly, deliberately. And there she stood, makeup smudged, eyes wide, one hand gripping the edge of the door like it was the only thing keeping her from falling. "Caro," she gasped, "you can't let them do this to me." I didn't answer. I didn't need to. She filled the silence like she always did, with lies, with tears, with that fake softness she wore like perfume. "You have no idea what it's like to be second best your whole life," she snapped. "You were always the smart one, the loved one, the stable one. I was tired of watching you get everything while I got nothing." Her voice cracked. "I didn't mean to fall for him. I didn't mean for it to go this far." I stared at her for a long moment and said, "You didn't mean to fall for him? Or you didn't mean to steal my baby's test, pad your stomach with towels, and lie under oath?" She flinched like I'd slapped her. "Good. Let it burn." She whispered, "Please, the press is calling me a fraud. I've lost modeling jobs." Mason left. "He won't return my calls. He said I ruined everything." I blinked slowly. "Mason's right. You did." I could see in her eyes she came hoping for mercy. A soft place to fall. But the woman who used to give her that, the woman who braided her hair during storms and defended her from bullies, died the day Celeste stole my child's future to chase her own fantasy. "I didn't press charges for identity fraud," I said calmly. "But that can change. So if you want advice, go home. Pack what you have left. And disappear." Celeste began to cry, hands shaking. "Where am I supposed to go?" I tilted my head. "The same place you told me to go when you stole my husband, anywhere that isn't here." I closed the door. Later that evening, I sat by the fireplace reading the final court update. The judge had ruled in my favor again, fully revoking Mason's claim on our business earnings and granting me sole ownership of our home and accounts. My lawyer's email read, "Congratulations. You didn't just win. You buried them." I didn't feel joy. Not the way you'd expect. I felt relief. I felt justice. And I felt my child move again, like he or she already knew that the storm had passed. I pressed a hand to my belly and whispered, "You'll never have to wonder if you were wanted. You'll never have to beg for love." I meant every word. Because while Celeste and Mason had plotted their fantasy on sand, I had been quietly building my foundation on truth. And the truth, when wielded correctly, is the sharpest weapon there is. The next day, I walked into my old antique shop, now mine again, and began rearranging things. New name. New front window. New start. I wasn't just the woman they tried to break. I was the woman who let them think they succeeded, and then turned their lies into my power. This wasn't revenge. This was rebirth. It was a warm Saturday in June when my baby shower took place, an afternoon wrapped in lilacs, laughter, and a strange kind of peace I hadn't felt in months. My best friend Julia planned everything down to the last ribbon: soft blues and creamy whites, lemon cake with raspberry filling, and dozens of tiny hand-knitted baby socks strung across the windows like banners of hope. Every guest who hugged me whispered, "You look radiant, Caro." And maybe I did. But not because of makeup or motherhood glow. No, because by then, the lie that had burned my life down had turned to ash, and from those ashes I'd built something no one could touch. Celeste didn't show up. Neither did Mason. Of course, they weren't invited. But people still whispered about them in corners. A few friends I hadn't seen in a while leaned in cautiously, asking, "Is it true what the papers said?" I didn't hide from it. I told them yes, my sister lied, my husband betrayed me, and they tried to build a fantasy on my real-life pregnancy. But justice worked. And I survived. One woman clutched my hand and said, "You're the bravest person I know." I smiled, but inside I thought, no, I'm just the quietest fighter in the room. Midway through the shower, someone brought in a box of gifts. There, nestled between soft blankets and lullaby books, was an envelope without a name. I opened it cautiously. Inside was a letter, sloppily written, almost frantic in tone. It was from Mason. "Caroline, I know I don't deserve to write to you, but I need to say this. Celeste was never pregnant. I didn't know at first, and when I found out, I was too ashamed to admit I'd been fooled. I see now how badly I hurt you, and I can't believe I threw away everything we had for a lie. I miss you. Every second. I know you probably hate me. But if there's any part of you that can forgive me, I want to be in the baby's life. Please. I'll do whatever it takes." Mason, my hands trembled slightly as I folded the letter. For a moment, the old me stirred, memories of Sunday pancakes, beach trips, late-night talks on the porch. But then I looked around. At the women who showed up. At the nursery gifts. At the child moving inside me. And I remembered, the man who wrote that letter had abandoned us the moment things got complicated. I couldn't afford to let sentimentality overwrite truth. I didn't respond. But I did keep the letter. Not because I needed it. Because my child might one day ask, "Where was Dad when I was born?" And I wanted to show them exactly what he'd done. 2 days after the shower, Celeste posted a photo online, her in a gray hoodie, sitting on a park bench with a bottle of cheap wine in her hand. The caption said, "Sometimes people turn their backs on you when you need them most." I didn't comment. But I noticed the comments underneath. They weren't supportive. "Didn't you fake a pregnancy? Girl, karma is working overtime. You really thought that would work?" Her fall from grace was complete. The modeling jobs dried up. Her social pages went quiet. Mason, from what I'd heard, was living in a sublet on the east side, barely holding on to a job at a hardware store. And me? I was rebuilding. Slowly. Carefully. Not just for me, but for the child growing beneath my ribs, who would never know lies as love or manipulation as affection. I hired a painter to redo the nursery in soft twilight lavender. As I watched the color go up, I whispered, "Your mama went to war for you." Because it wasn't just a baby I was carrying. It was a legacy of truth, rebirth, and resilience. And as I stood there, watching the walls bloom with promise, I felt something I hadn't felt in months. Peace. It was a Tuesday afternoon when he showed up again, this time not just with words, but with a bouquet of limp carnations and a face I barely recognized. Mason. Standing on my doorstep like a ghost who finally realized he died months ago. I didn't open the screen door right away. I stared at him through it, hand resting protectively over my swollen belly, wondering what kind of man can lie with a kiss and still believe he deserves redemption. "Caroline," he said quietly, "please. I just want to talk." I opened the door. Not for him, for myself. I wanted to see how it felt. To look into the eyes of someone who shattered me and feel nothing. He stepped inside cautiously, like a man walking into his own grave. "You look beautiful," he said. I ignored it. He set the flowers on the counter and added, "I know I have no right to ask, but I want to be part of the baby's life." I raised an eyebrow. "So you can abandon another child the moment someone else whispers a better lie?" His face flushed. "I made a mistake." "No, Mason," I said coolly, "you made a series of choices. Mistakes happen when you trip." "You? You packed a bag and walked into betrayal." He sat down heavily on the edge of the couch, rubbing his face with both hands. "You don't understand what she did to me. Celeste lied about everything. She told me you were going to leave me. She said the baby was mine. I held up a hand. You don't get to use my sister's poison as your excuse. You slept with her. You believed her. And when I stood there begging for the truth, you said nothing. That silence? That was your betrayal. Not hers. Yours." The room felt still, heavy. Mason didn't respond. He just sat there, wrecked by the weight of his own collapse. I walked to the mantel, picked up a framed photo of us from 5 years ago, smiling on the cliffs of Martha's Vineyard, the wind in my hair, his arms around me. I turned it around and set it face down. "I already mourned you, Mason. Don't make me dig up the grave." He stood, hands clenched. "So that's it? You won't even consider letting me be a father?" I narrowed my eyes. "You weren't a father when it mattered. Why should you get the privilege now?" He took a deep breath, then nodded like a man hearing his sentence passed. "I'm sorry," he whispered, voice cracking. "I'll sign whatever you want. I just needed you to hear me." I met his eyes, cold and steady. "I did hear you, Mason. Months ago. When you said nothing and let her steal my test. That silence told me everything." He turned slowly, left the flowers behind, and walked out without another word. I watched from the window as he stood by his car for a moment, head bowed, hands shaking. I didn't feel triumphant. I didn't feel cruel. I felt complete. Sometimes the greatest revenge isn't shouting. It's thriving. It's rebuilding in plain sight while they fall apart, and not even having to lift a finger. Later that evening, Julia stopped by with some groceries and a bottle of sparkling apple cider. "You good?" she asked, noticing the flowers in the trash. I smiled. "Better than I've been in years." We toasted with clinks of glass and laughter, and as the sun set outside the nursery window, I felt something shift inside me. A quiet strength. A steady calm. I had faced both of them, Mason and Celeste, and I didn't break. And now? Now I was ready to rise. It was the kind of morning that starts gentle, soft light falling through sheer curtains, the air smelling of lavender from the nursery diffuser. I was halfway through a bowl of oatmeal when I got the call. "We served her this morning," my lawyer said, matter-of-factly. She cried. Tried to argue. "But the paperwork is solid. You're about to own the whole narrative now." I didn't ask for details. I didn't need them. I just said, "Good," and hung up, placing my spoon down with slow precision. This wasn't about being cold, it was about staying in control. Celeste had played her game with glitter and lipstick. I was playing mine with facts and patience. The papers delivered to her apartment weren't just legal documents. They were a full declaration. I was suing her directly for fraud, emotional damages, and defamation, on top of the court's ongoing asset reassessment. She'd dragged my name through the mud, lied about her pregnancy, and stolen something as sacred as a positive test. But the real kicker? My legal team had acquired a voice recording, Celeste, drunkenly bragging at a party 2 months ago about how easy it was to play big sis like a harp. The clip was barely a minute, but it was enough. Enough to strip her of credibility, enough to turn her online followers against her. The clip was leaked anonymously the next day. Twitter erupted. Comments flooded in, "You faked a pregnancy for a man? You lied about your sister's baby? Who even does that? Unforgivable. Trash. Celeste tried to control the damage. She posted a sobbing video on Instagram, talking about mental health and being misunderstood. She even tried to twist it, claiming I had always been jealous of her beauty, that Mason had fallen in love with who he really connected with, and that the baby test was a mix-up. But it was too late. The internet smelled blood. And for once, I wasn't the one bleeding. What no one knew, what I hadn't told a soul, was that the very first night she stole the test, I had quietly installed a small camera in the upstairs hallway. One of those inconspicuous nanny cams disguised as a diffuser. Weeks later, I had captured her sneaking into my bathroom, searching through drawers, holding my original test up to the light with trembling hands, whispering, "This is it, this is my chance." That footage wasn't public yet. But it would be. Because I was saving it for the court date. That night, Julia and I sat on the porch sipping herbal tea while the crickets hummed and the stars blinked down like old friends. "Do you ever regret not confronting her the day she did it?" she asked. I shook my head. No. If I had, she would have twisted it, cried, made me doubt myself. This way, she built the lie herself. All I did was wait for it to collapse. I went to sleep that night with a calm heart. The baby kicked just before I drifted off, as if telling me, "You're doing it, Mama. Keep going." And I whispered back, "I will. I promise." Because revenge wasn't about rage anymore. It was about reclaiming my name, my body, my story. One silent move at a time. It was surreal, sitting across from the two people who once meant the world to me. There they were, Celeste in a beige pantsuit 2 sizes too tight, Mason with unshaven cheeks and eyes heavy with shame. The courtroom smelled like wood polish and old air, and everything felt too quiet, like the calm before a hurricane. I sat with my lawyer, Nora, sharp, brilliant, and unshakable. She glanced at me once, leaned over, and whispered, "Today, we don't just win, we expose." The judge entered, papers rustled, and suddenly my personal hell was being read aloud like it was a grocery list. Petitioner claims emotional and financial damages stemming from fraudulent misrepresentation of pregnancy, the clerk stated. Celeste shifted in her seat, chewing the inside of her cheek. Mason wouldn't look at me. He just stared down, hands clenched together like a schoolboy awaiting punishment. Nora stood, composed and calm. "Your Honor, this is not just a case of a bad breakup or sibling rivalry. This is about identity theft, emotional coercion, and financial manipulation." The respondent faked a pregnancy using the petitioner's actual test result. She used that lie to seduce the petitioner's husband and manipulate him into abandoning a marriage. What followed was a theft, not only of property and finances, but of dignity. Celeste's lawyer, some mediocre man with too much cologne and too few facts, tried to argue that there was no concrete evidence of malicious intent. That Celeste believed she was pregnant. That it was all just a misunderstanding. That's when Nora turned to me, nodded once, and stood tall. "We would like to submit this into evidence," she said, and played the hallway footage. The room went still. There she was, my sister, in high-definition silence, holding the pregnancy test I'd taken, whispering, "This is it. This is my chance. Mason's mine now." You could hear a pin drop. The judge leaned forward, hands folded, eyes narrowed. "Miss Gray," he said to Celeste, "would you like to explain this recording?" Celeste's face drained of color. She opened her mouth, stammered, then said, "That was taken without my consent." The judge cut her off. "It was taken inside the petitioner's home. Legally admissible. Try again." And for the first time since this nightmare began, Celeste didn't have a script. She blinked rapidly, looked at Mason, who was now pale as chalk. I was desperate. I didn't think it would go this far. She turned to me then, tears welling in her eyes, and said, "Caro, I didn't mean to hurt you. I always wanted what you had." And there it was, the truth, raw and ugly, finally gasping for air. The judge ordered a recess, but the damage was done. The press waiting outside had already heard enough. By the time I stepped into the hallway, flashes exploded around me like fireflies on steroids. A reporter shoved a mic toward me. "Caroline, is it true your sister stole your pregnancy test and used it to seduce your husband?" I didn't flinch. I looked into the camera and simply said, "Truth always wins. Even if it takes a while." Back home that evening, I sat alone in the nursery, running my hand across the soft blue mobile above the crib. I thought I'd feel triumphant. I thought I'd feel vindicated. Instead, I just felt hollowed out, and oddly free. I had spent months carrying the weight of what they did. But now? That weight was finally starting to lift. The lies were no longer mine to carry. They were hers now, hers to own, hers to rot beneath. And I was finally beginning to breathe again. By the next morning, the video had gone viral. Not just on legal forums or gossip blogs, but everywhere. TikTok, Facebook, Reddit threads titled "This woman faked a pregnancy using her sister's test, and got exposed in court." A snippet of the footage Nora played was leaked, showing Celeste whispering those infamous words, "This is it. This is my chance." They were shared by influencers, commentators, even lawyers dissecting every moment like it was courtroom gold. But it wasn't just the video that made the world snap. It was the look on my face, calm, composed, deeply betrayed but devastatingly controlled, that caught people off guard. "This is how a woman wins," one post read. "With evidence. With dignity. With fire behind her silence." The internet, for once, wasn't eating me alive. It was rallying around me. I was no longer the scorned wife. I was something else entirely, the woman who turned her sister's lies into a lesson the world couldn't ignore. Celeste, however, wasn't built to endure public humiliation. She spiraled fast. Her followers dropped by the thousands. Brands she'd partnered with issued public statements distancing themselves. One cosmetics line even released a cutting post, "We stand with truth. Not manufactured drama and fraudulent schemes." Her social media turned into a battlefield of deleted comments, apology videos, and desperate attempts at sympathy. "I was manipulated too," she cried in one post, mascara streaking down her cheeks. "I didn't mean for it to get this far." But people weren't buying it anymore. Even the trolls were tired of her lies. Meanwhile, I kept quiet. I didn't need to scream. Every headline did it for me. "Sisterhood betrayed, Caroline Roy speaks through actions, not words." I received interview requests, podcast invites, even a book deal offer. I declined them all. I wasn't interested in becoming a spectacle. I just wanted peace, protection, and the space to raise my child without the ghosts of betrayal scratching at the walls. But one thing I did accept was an invitation to speak at a local women's empowerment event. Julia nudged me toward it. "Tell your story," she said. "Not for them. For you." So I went, trembling inside, but steady on the outside. I stood on a stage in front of 200 women and said, "My sister stole my pregnancy test and used it to seduce my husband. I lost them both in one day. But I never lost myself. And I never lost my baby. And that's how I won." They gave me a standing ovation. That night, I returned home to find another envelope on my doorstep. No name. Inside, a single photo. Me and Celeste as kids, covered in chalk, laughing on the sidewalk. On the back, in her handwriting, "I wish I could go back before I became jealous of you. Before I ruined everything." I sat with the photo for a long time. Not crying. Not even angry. Just stunned by the weight of what envy can do. It doesn't just ruin lives. It eats through memories, rewrites history, makes monsters of the people we once braided hair with and called our best friend. I tucked the photo into a drawer. Some things don't need to be framed. They just need to be remembered. Because I wasn't done yet. The court ruling was coming. And I still had the final word. The final day in court felt nothing like I thought it would. I didn't walk in with rage in my veins or a need to watch anyone squirm. I just wanted it over. Closure. Justice. Peace. I wore a soft gray dress that hugged my pregnant belly gently and pulled my hair back the way I used to in college, before all the lies, before my sister and husband decided I was just a body to steal from. Celeste looked like a ghost of herself. Her once perfect curls were dull, pulled back in a desperate bun. She wore flats instead of heels and clutched her elbows like they were the only thing holding her together. Mason sat beside her, stiff, no tie, just a cheap blazer and guilt hanging on him like a scent. The judge entered. The gallery was full. Press. Curious strangers. Maybe even a few enemies hoping I'd lose my cool. But I didn't. Because Nora was beside me, calm as ever, and because I had already made peace with the truth. The judge began to speak, after reviewing evidence, including video footage, audio admissions, and the pattern of deception. The court finds in favor of the petitioner, Caroline Royce. The claims of fraud are substantiated. All shared marital property, including the business, home, and savings accounts, shall remain with the petitioner. The respondent's attempts to manipulate medical claims for gain have not only failed but have warranted further scrutiny by this court. Further scrutiny. That meant one thing: Celeste was now under investigation for insurance fraud and perjury. Mason would likely face financial penalties. But as far as I was concerned, the punishment had already started. The sentence was being them. The judge continued, custody and parental rights will be decided post-birth, but the court acknowledges the petitioner's right to deny paternal contact if deception, abandonment, or misconduct can be demonstrated. Preliminary findings suggest the respondent's claim to parenthood was not made in good faith. That was Nora's doing. She dug up every text, every statement Mason made about not being ready for a baby when he was with me, and compared it to the fantasy he built with Celeste. The judge read it all. So did the room. I didn't look at either of them when the gavel came down. I didn't need to. Celeste let out a strangled sob. Mason didn't move at all. He just stared ahead, like he was finally realizing the full cost of what he'd traded me for. Outside the courthouse, I took a deep breath. Cameras flashed again, but I walked past them. Julia was waiting by my car. "It's done?" she asked. I nodded. "It's done." But before I could open the door, someone called my name. I turned. "Mason." He approached, slowly. "Caroline," he said softly, "can we talk? Just 2 minutes?" I didn't respond. He kept going. "I don't want anything. I just wanted to say, I know what I did can't be undone. But I want to do better. I want to be there for the baby, if you'll let me." I tilted my head and asked, "Why? Because Celeste got caught? Because your fantasy crashed and you remembered I was real?" He blinked. "No. Because I realized I lost the only woman who ever loved me honestly." I stepped closer, lowered my voice. "You didn't lose me, Mason. You gave me away. Like a used napkin. And now you want to sit at my table again because your plate broke." I reached into my purse and handed him a small white envelope. "That's for you." He looked confused. "What is it?" I smiled. "A pre-drafted custody agreement. You want visitation? You'll earn it. And not with tears. With therapy. With accountability. And with the knowledge that this child isn't your redemption. This child is mine. My future. My proof that even from broken places, life grows." He looked down at the envelope, speechless. I got in the car. Julia didn't ask what happened. She didn't need to. Back home that night, I opened the nursery window and let the wind blow through. I placed my hands on my belly and whispered, "We did it, little one. Mama kept her promise." The battle was over. But the becoming? That had just begun. There's something sacred about the way a baby moves inside you after a storm. Like your body knows it survived. Like your child is tapping a message from within, I'm still here. And so are you. I was 7 months pregnant the day I walked into the small room at the hospital for a solo checkup. It was the first time I'd gone without a support person. No Mason. No Celeste pretending to be excited. No friend taking pictures. Just me, a warm robe, and the rhythmic sound of my baby's heartbeat thumping strong on the monitor. The nurse asked gently, "Do you want to know the gender today?" I hesitated for only a moment. Then nodded. Yes. She turned the screen toward me and smiled. Congratulations. You're having a girl. I didn't cry. I just whispered, "Of course I am." Because in some twisted way, I think I always knew. The war I'd fought wasn't just for myself, it was for her. For the future woman I was bringing into a world where even family could break you if you weren't careful. But she wouldn't be broken. I wouldn't allow it. On the drive home, I started making a list of names in my head, names that didn't just sound beautiful but meant something. Alina. Grace. Harper. Nora. Names of women who survived. Names of women who rebuilt. Names I would be proud to call my daughter. Then, as I stopped at a red light, I thought of one more. One that hadn't touched my lips in years. Eleanor. My grandmother's name. The one who raised me when Mom left. The woman who once told me, "Don't you ever let pretty lies steal your truth." I smiled. Her name would be Eleanor Grace Royce. That night, I stood in the nursery and said it aloud for the first time. Eleanor. My daughter kicked. As if in approval. As if to say, yes. That's me. I placed a soft pink blanket on the crib and lit the lavender candle beside it. I wasn't just decorating a room. I was building a promise. A sanctuary. A space where no one would ever take what was hers, not her name, not her joy, not her truth. A few days later, I received a letter in the mail. A formal one. From Mason's new attorney. Seeking visitation rights post-birth. Offers co-parenting plan. Apologizes for prior misconduct. I didn't even finish reading it. I handed it to Nora. File it. But keep full custody. No shared anything until he proves he's a man, not a shadow. She nodded. You got it. There was no malice in my tone. Just clarity. Calm. Boundaries sharpened by betrayal. Celeste had gone silent. Word was she left town. A mutual friend told me she'd been staying in a friend's spare bedroom, trying to rebrand her image online. But it wasn't working. Her name had become a punchline. And even though I hadn't laid a finger on her, I'd done what she never thought I could, made the world see her without her mask. The greatest revenge wasn't money. Or property. Or court wins. It was having a daughter named Eleanor, sleeping safely in a crib I built with my own hands, under a roof they tried to steal, surrounded by love they could never counterfeit. It was knowing I had survived not just them, but the version of myself who thought I needed them. And that version? Was never coming back. Labor didn't feel like the movies. No dramatic water breaking on a grocery store floor. No panicked race to the hospital. Just a quiet pressure building in waves that felt like the earth itself was tugging at me from the inside. I was folding baby clothes when the first real contraction hit. I dropped the onesie and gripped the edge of the crib, breathing slow, steady. Okay, I whispered to myself. This is it. Julia rushed me to the hospital, her hands on the wheel, mine on my belly. You've got this, she kept saying. You've already done the hardest part. I didn't know if she meant the pregnancy or the betrayal. Maybe both. The delivery room was warm, white, and full of nurses with kind eyes. My doctor, Dr. Elson, squeezed my hand. Ready to meet your daughter? I nodded, sweat on my brow, determination in my chest. 12 hours later, she was in my arms. Eleanor. All 8 pounds of her. Eyes the color of storm clouds and a soft fuzz of hair that smelled like heaven. I didn't cry at first. I just stared. Because I was afraid if I blinked, I'd miss the moment I had fought so hard for. "You're safe now," I whispered against her tiny ear. "And no one's ever going to take what's yours." I stayed in the hospital for 2 days. Visitors came and went. Julia brought cupcakes. My aunt sent flowers. Even my old college roommate popped in, eyes wide with joy. But on the morning of our discharge, there was a knock at the hospital room door, and my heart stopped. It was Mason. He stood there holding a small plush giraffe, shoulders hunched, lips trembling. "I heard. Julia told me you were here." "I'm sorry. I just wanted to meet her." I stared at him, my baby tucked in my arms, her breathing soft and perfect. "This isn't the time," I said gently but firmly. "And this isn't the place." He nodded, eyes glistening. "I know. But, please, Caroline. Just 1 minute." I didn't want a scene. I didn't want my daughter's first memory to be born into tension. So I nodded. 1 minute. No more. He stepped in slowly, like a man entering church for the first time. He looked at Eleanor, then at me. "She's beautiful," he whispered. "She looks like you." I didn't respond. I wasn't here to comfort his guilt. He cleared his throat. "I wanted to say congratulations. And I know I don't deserve anything. But if you ever change your mind about letting me be in her life, I'll be here." He set the giraffe down on the table beside my water cup and backed toward the door. "I'll never forgive myself for what I did. But I will keep trying to be better. Even if you never see it." Then he left. The room was quiet again. I looked down at Eleanor. She yawned. The most innocent little movement in a world that had tried so hard to poison her beginning. I kissed her forehead and whispered, "You don't need his presence to have a family. You've already got one. Right here." By the time we returned home, the nursery was warm and waiting. I tucked her into her crib, sat beside it, and watched her sleep. In the quiet, I heard a bird sing outside. A new morning. A new chapter. One where the lies were over. Where the truth lived in soft breath and tiny fists. Where my sister's cruelty and my husband's betrayal could no longer touch us. Because in the end, they gave me pain. But she gave me purpose. It was a slow Sunday morning, the kind that smelled like cinnamon toast and baby powder. Eleanor was asleep in her bassinet, and I finally had a moment to open the leather-bound baby book Julia had gifted me. Soft pink pages. Gold embossed edges. A place to record every first, the first kick, first photo, first breath. I wrote slowly, my pen gliding over memories I had once feared I'd never get to make. Born on a Tuesday, eyes like storms, hands that already know how to hold on tight. My heart felt full. Until I opened my email. The subject line read, "From Celeste." I stared at it for a long moment, my breath caught between caution and curiosity. I knew I shouldn't open it. But I did. "Caroline, I know I'm the last person you ever want to hear from. I don't expect forgiveness. But I want to explain. Not to justify. Just to unload something I've carried since I left. I was pregnant once. Before all this. Years ago. And I lost the baby. I never told anyone. Not even Mason. I buried it so deep that I started pretending it had never happened. When I saw your test, something cracked in me. I didn't steal it just to hurt you. I stole it because I couldn't stand that you had what I lost. That doesn't make what I did okay. It just means I was already broken when I betrayed you. And maybe that's why I destroyed the one person who always believed in me. I hope you and your daughter are happy. I hope she never knows someone like me. Celeste." I read the message 3 times. Not because I believed her. But because I needed to sit with the weight of it. The twisted knot of her pain and cruelty. how grief had turned her from a sister into a thief. It didn't make me pity her. It didn't absolve her. But it did explain something. Celeste hadn't just stolen my test. She had stolen her own identity somewhere along the way, too. I didn't reply. Instead, I walked over to Eleanor and watched her sleep, her fingers twitching slightly like she was dreaming. I whispered, "You'll never be raised in a house where women compete to survive. You'll never be told love is something you have to steal." The following week, Julia convinced me to join a new mother's circle, something I'd avoided because I wasn't ready to sit in a room full of perfect-looking families talking about diaper brands and husbands who brought flowers. But I went. And I was surprised. The women were real. One was divorced. Another was raising a baby while her husband was deployed. And one, Marissa, had recently lost her own mother during childbirth and was now raising her sister's baby as her own. We all had cracks. But no one flinched from them. When it was my turn to speak, I simply said, "My sister faked a pregnancy to steal my husband." But I got the only thing that mattered in the end. Every head turned. No one judged. And in their silence, I felt something I hadn't in months: belonging. That night, I added one more entry to Eleanor's baby book, First Truths Spoken Aloud. Because healing doesn't always come in grand victories. Sometimes, it comes in quiet circles. In shared pain. In not hiding anymore. And though Celeste had taken so much, my peace, my trust, my marriage, she hadn't taken this. She hadn't taken my voice. It started with a simple message in my Instagram inbox. "We'd love to have you speak on our show. Not to sensationalize, but to humanize. When you're ready." It was from a woman named Ria, an independent podcast host with a growing audience of women who'd survived betrayal, loss, and reinvention. I almost deleted the message. But something stopped me. Maybe it was the way she wrote it, not as clickbait, but as an invitation. Maybe it was the way I was tired of being defined by silence. So I said yes. Julia came with me to the recording studio, a cozy, plant-filled loft in Cambridge with microphones and soft lighting that made everything feel like a living room, not a battlefield. I wore a simple blouse and no makeup. I didn't need armor anymore. Ria smiled as we sat down. "You've already inspired thousands, Caroline. Whether you realize it or not." I nodded quietly. "I don't want to be famous," I said. "I just want the truth to live somewhere outside my head." And then we began. She asked questions gently but directly. What happened the day I found out? What did it feel like when I saw my sister holding my pregnancy test? When did I stop mourning Mason and start rebuilding? And most of all, what gave me the strength to keep going? I didn't cry. I told her about the cold morning on the bathroom floor. About watching them lie to my face. About playing broken so I could strike when it mattered. About Eleanor. About the baby who saved me from a war I didn't start but had to finish. "But do you forgive them?" she finally asked. I paused. "I forgive myself," I said. For ever believing that love could excuse cruelty. For staying silent too long. For almost letting their lie become my story. As for them? I don't hate them anymore. But I don't forget either. My peace isn't about pretending it didn't happen. It's about surviving anyway. That quote spread like wildfire online. Thousands shared it. My peace isn't about pretending it didn't happen. It's about surviving anyway. Suddenly, I was getting emails from women across the country. "My sister stole my boyfriend in high school. I never healed, until your story. Your strength made me walk away from a manipulative marriage. Thank you for showing that motherhood doesn't need a perfect beginning to be powerful." Even the bookstore near my house reached out, asking if I'd speak at a women's resilience panel. Julia printed out some of the kindest messages and stuck them to my fridge, a growing collage of strangers who saw me not as a victim, but as proof that the truth doesn't break you. It builds you. But not everyone was applauding. Late one night, a fake account posted something cruel under one of my photos with Eleanor. "Stop milking this. We get it. Your sister was a witch. Move on." For a second, I froze. But then I remembered, people only throw stones when you're standing tall. So I replied, "I didn't choose this story. But I chose to survive it. That's the difference." The comment was flooded with likes and support. Celeste never responded to the podcast. But I know she saw it. Mason, too. They didn't need to say anything. Their silence was its own kind of confession. I stood in Eleanor's nursery later that night, holding her against my chest, feeling her heartbeat like a drum against my skin. And I whispered, "You are not born from betrayal. You're born from truth. From fight. From grace." Because no matter how ugly the beginning had been, the ending? That was mine to write. It had been nearly 4 months since Eleanor was born, and every day felt like a quiet miracle. She was sleeping longer at night, giggling at shadows, and holding her head up with fierce determination. People said she looked like me, and when she smiled, it was like the world rewound itself to a time before betrayal. A time before I ever saw 2 pink lines and made the mistake of celebrating it in front of the wrong person. I thought the worst was behind me. Until I saw her. Celeste. At the cafe near my house. She looked thinner. Not glamorously so, just worn down, like regret had taken up residence in her bones. She wore oversized sunglasses even though it was cloudy, and when she spotted me walking in with Eleanor strapped to my chest, she froze like she'd seen a ghost. I turned, ready to leave. But she stood, blocking the door. "Please," she said. "Caroline. Just a minute." I said nothing. "Can we talk?" "Somewhere private?" she asked, voice shaking. I stared at her for a long, quiet moment. "You want privacy? You had that. Before the lies. Before the video. Before the world saw who you were." I shifted Eleanor slightly. "You don't get a soft landing now." Tears welled in her eyes. "I don't want anything from you. I swear. I just. I need to say something. You deserve to hear it." I stepped aside, letting her move past me. Not because I wanted her apology, but because I wanted to hear the cracks in her voice. I wanted to know what it cost her. We sat at a back corner table. I didn't take off Eleanor's wrap. She stirred lightly, then settled, her tiny head against my chest. Celeste stared at her for a moment. "She's beautiful," she whispered. "You named her Eleanor, didn't you? After Grandma?" I said nothing. "I dream about her sometimes," she said. "Not the baby. You. Us. Before I ruined everything." "You didn't just ruin us," I replied. "You tried to erase me and replace me. You tried to become me." "I know," she said. "And I hate myself for it. I thought if I could have what you had, I'd finally feel whole. But I felt empty the second he left, the second the world turned on me." "You weren't empty," I said coldly. "You were exposed." She flinched. "I've been going to therapy," she said. "I know that means nothing to you now. But I had to tell someone. I had to say it out loud. I miss you. Not the lies. You." I looked down at Eleanor's sleeping face. Her fingers curled gently near her mouth. "I mourned the sister I thought I had," I said softly. "That version of you is dead. And you're going to have to live with what you killed." Celeste swallowed, eyes rimmed with red. "Will you ever forgive me?" I looked up and met her gaze. "Forgiveness isn't a door you knock on. It's one that opens from the inside. And right now, that door is locked, for good reason." She nodded slowly, wiping her face. "I understand." I stood. "Then do something with that understanding. Don't write me. Don't post about me. Don't orbit my life like a ghost. Just disappear. That's the only apology I'll accept. And I walked away. Outside, the sky had started to clear. I kissed Eleanor's forehead and whispered, "You'll never be tricked by fake love, little one. Because I'll show you what real love looks like, by protecting you from it." That night, I lit a candle on the windowsill and watched it burn low. I wasn't bitter. I wasn't vengeful. But I was done. Done giving grace to people who didn't even know what it cost. It was a rainy Tuesday when I got the call from my lawyer, Nora. "You should come in," she said. "There's something you need to see. It concerns your ex-husband." I packed Eleanor's bag, dropped her off at Julia's with a kiss on her forehead, and drove through the downpour, heart heavy but steady. I'd learned to expect aftershocks from the earthquake Celeste and Mason had caused. But I didn't expect this one. When I arrived, Nora slid a legal envelope across her desk. "Mason's father passed last week. There's a will. You're still listed in it." My brows lifted. "What?" "He never updated it after your divorce. You're the primary beneficiary." I blinked. "But why me? Not Mason?" Nora folded her hands. "Because apparently, his father knew. About everything. The test. The affair. The betrayal. He'd written a letter. You'll want to read it." I opened the envelope and pulled out a single sheet of paper in shaky, cursive handwriting. "Caroline, I always thought you were the best thing my son ever had." When I heard what he did, what Celeste did, I wanted to speak up. But pride held me back. "I see now how wrong that was. You were always the kind of woman this family didn't deserve. So I leave what little I have to you and your child. To be used however you see fit. And if Mason tries to contest it, this letter will speak for me from the grave. With regret and respect, Alan Royce." I sat in stunned silence. "Why now?" I asked Nora. "Why after everything, does it still feel like he's apologizing for someone else's sins?" "Because that's what decent people do when they realize silence was a form of betrayal too," she replied. "The inheritance wasn't huge. A modest property in Vermont, some bonds, a few personal heirlooms. But it wasn't the value, it was the meaning. A man who once looked the other way had finally looked back and said, 'You mattered.'" Later that night, I received a voicemail from Mason. "Caroline, I heard about the will. I'm not calling to fight it. I'm not calling to ask for anything. I just want you to know, he always liked you more. He told me once I didn't deserve you. I hated hearing it back then. Now I know he was right." I didn't return the call. But I did write something down in Eleanor's baby book. "Today, you inherited your name's worth. Not in money, but in dignity." I went up to the attic and found an old box of photos from my marriage. I sorted them slowly, pulling out the few that held good memories, and discarding the rest. It wasn't bitterness. It was reclamation. A quiet act of taking back the narrative. That weekend, I drove to Vermont to see the property. It was a small, aging cottage with ivy creeping up one side and a porch that groaned beneath your feet. But the moment I stepped inside, I knew, this would be Eleanor's legacy. A summer home. A safe place. A space not touched by betrayal but built from the wreckage of it. On the mantel, I placed a framed photo of just the two of us. No Mason. No Celeste. Just a mother and her daughter. Born from fire. But now bathed in light. I hadn't stepped foot into that upstairs bathroom in nearly a year. Not since the morning I wept with joy over those two pink lines. Not since Celeste saw them, and stole everything. After the divorce, I couldn't bring myself to look at the space where the lie began. I used the guest bathroom instead. I'd keep the door to this one shut, like it was a crime scene. But that morning, with Eleanor asleep in her crib and soft light spilling across the hallway floor, I opened the door. Everything was still the same. The white-tiled floor. The slightly chipped sink basin. The faint scent of rosewater soap. But it didn't feel haunted anymore. It felt like a time capsule, and one I was finally ready to touch. I sat on the edge of the tub, staring at the mirror. My reflection didn't flinch this time. I wasn't the broken woman hiding in shadows anymore. I was someone who had walked through betrayal, humiliation, and grief, and emerged stronger. I placed a small box on the counter. Inside it, the original positive test I'd found in the trash weeks after the trial. I'd kept it. Not out of sentimentality, but as a reminder. A reminder that I knew the truth before anyone else. A reminder that no matter how deep the lie buried me, I clawed my way to the surface. I took the test out and placed it gently on the counter. Then I picked up a permanent marker and wrote a date on the back, Eleanor's due date. Below that, one word, mine. I smiled at my reflection. Later that day, I hosted a small gathering for the women from the moms group. The living room was full of soft music, laughter, and babies in pastel onesies. There was no pretense. No one cared how anyone looked. No one asked about husbands or sisters. They asked about sleep schedules and diaper brands and whether mashed avocado really was a choking hazard. Marissa, who'd lost her sister but was now raising her niece, handed me a baby blanket she'd sewn herself. For Eleanor, she said. From one survivor to another. We shared a look that needed no explanation. That night, after everyone left and the house went quiet again, I walked upstairs with Eleanor nestled against my chest. I paused at the bathroom door once more, then slowly closed it behind me. Not because I was afraid, but because it no longer needed to stay open. The memory had been faced. The ghosts had been laid to rest. I returned to the nursery and rocked Eleanor in the glider chair. She looked up at me with those storm-gray eyes and cooed softly. I kissed her tiny fingers and whispered, "You were never a symbol of pain. You were my beginning." Outside, the wind stirred the trees. Inside, the truth stood unshaken. It was a cool September evening when Julia talked me into attending a family dinner being hosted by my cousin Angela. Just a small gathering, she promised. Your aunt, a few cousins, and absolutely no drama. I didn't believe that for a second, but I agreed anyway. Something in me wanted to reclaim the spaces I used to walk through quietly. I was tired of being the whispered about woman. I wanted to be seen, on my own terms. Eleanor wore a dusty pink dress with little stars stitched along the hem. She babbled in my arms as I stepped through Angela's front door and was greeted by hugs and wide eyes. The last time most of them had seen me, I'd been mid-scandal, mid-divorce, mid-chaos. Now? I walked in whole. People said kind things. They held Eleanor like she was royalty. For a while, I actually enjoyed myself. Until I saw her. Celeste. Standing in the hallway, dressed modestly, eyes downcast. I didn't even know she was back in town, let alone invited. Angela rushed over. I didn't think she'd come. I swear. She wasn't on the list. She must have found out through her mom. I could have left. No one would have blamed me. But instead, I stood still. My feet rooted to the floor like they'd been waiting for this moment. Celeste slowly approached. The room dimmed with tension. Conversations quieted. Caroline, she said. Her voice didn't shake this time. I know you don't owe me anything. But I need to say something, this one last time. And not for pity. Not for forgiveness. Just so I can leave this place with the truth in the air. I didn't respond. But I didn't stop her either. She turned to the room. I hurt my sister in a way I'll never be able to undo. I stole from her, lied to her, and tried to become something I wasn't, because I thought envy could fix what was broken inside me. It didn't. It only made me hollow. She turned back to me. You were the better woman the whole time. Not because you were perfect. But because you never pretended. I did. And it cost me everything. The room stayed silent. Eleanor let out a soft cry, and I gently rocked her, never breaking eye contact with the woman who'd tried to replace me. I don't need your words, I said calmly. But I hope you use them on yourself. I hope you say them in a mirror every day until they mean something. Not for me. For the girl you used to be, before she decided I was the enemy. Celeste's face crumpled, not in theatrics, but in quiet collapse. She nodded once, then left. No one stopped her. Angela came over later and whispered, that was something. I just said, that was closure. As I drove home, the moon was high and silver. Eleanor slept in the car seat behind me, her tiny breath rhythmic and pure. I didn't feel triumphant. I felt clean. As if years of pain had finally been washed away, not by justice or revenge, but by truth spoken without anger. That night, I stood over Eleanor's crib and whispered, the past came knocking, and I didn't hide. I didn't scream. I stood tall, and I stayed me. Because in the end, my strength wasn't about never being broken. It was about never letting them keep the pieces. It had been weeks since the dinner. Since Celeste's final apology. Since I looked her in the eye and didn't flinch. My life was quiet now, peaceful in a way I had never imagined possible after the storm. Eleanor had started saying her first sounds, soft gurgles, a tiny maa that made me cry in the kitchen. Julia joked that she was learning to talk just in time to testify in favor of her mother. But some nights, the past still whispered. Not loud. Not cruel. Just a nudge. A memory. A sentence I never got to say when it mattered. And so I wrote it down. Not to send. Just to release. It was addressed to Celeste. You didn't just steal a test. You stole the moment I'd waited years to feel. You stole the joy from the first flutter of a heartbeat, the soft thrill of telling my husband I was finally going to be a mother again. And worse, you made me doubt whether I ever wanted to be one. But you know what you couldn't steal? My strength. My name. My daughter's first laugh. My ability to rebuild, slowly, beautifully, without you. You can call it jealousy. You can call it desperation. But I call it a lesson. You taught me to trust slower. To love myself harder. To be a woman no one can rewrite. And for that, strangely, I thank you. But don't mistake my healing for permission to return. We may share blood. But we no longer share a story. That chapter has ended, and it won't be reopened. I folded the letter, sealed it in an envelope, and placed it in the bottom drawer of my nightstand. Not out of fear. But as a reminder, I chose not to send it because I no longer needed her to hear those words. I needed me to say them. That same week, I got a call from a local nonprofit I'd spoken to months earlier, Women Rising, an organization that helped women rebuild their lives after family betrayal and abuse. Caroline, we're launching a mentorship program, the director said. We'd love for you to speak. Maybe share your story. Maybe just sit with women who feel like they're losing their voices. I didn't hesitate. Yes, I said. I'd be honored. At the first meeting, I stood before a small group of women seated in folding chairs. Some were bruised. Some were exhausted. All of them looked like I once did, like they were holding their breath and waiting to be believed. I didn't open with my story. I opened with this: your worth doesn't change just because someone failed to see it. Your truth doesn't shrink just because someone tried to bury it. And your life? It doesn't end here. It begins again, right here, in this room, with your name still yours. And for the first time in a long time, I saw myself not as the woman they broke, but as the woman who returned stronger. That night, as Eleanor fell asleep against my shoulder, I whispered, one day, you'll ask me about my sister. About your father. About the mess you were born from. And I'll tell you the truth. But I'll also tell you what came after. I'll tell you about Grace. And why your name, Eleanor Grace, was never a coincidence. I hadn't been back to the brownstone in almost a year. The house Mason and I once bought with dreams and secrets layered into its walls. The house where Celeste moved in like a shadow and planted poison beneath the floorboards. After the court awarded it to me, I rented it out to a nice couple with a newborn. I couldn't bear to live in it then. But now, I wanted to see it one last time before I decided what to do with it. Julia came with me. Eleanor in her stroller, babbling as we pushed her up the cobbled walk. I had the keys in my purse. We walked through the front door like ghosts visiting a life that no longer existed. The walls had been repainted. The furniture replaced. But I could still feel the echoes. The laughter that came before the betrayal. The silence that followed after. It wasn't haunting, it was hollow. In the hallway mirror, I saw my reflection holding my daughter, and for the first time, I didn't see the woman who had been left. I saw the woman who stayed. Who rebuilt. Who rose. I walked into the bathroom where it all started. Where the test was taken. Where the lie was born. I looked at the cabinet where I had once hidden hope. And I reached into my pocket. I pulled out a tiny object. A key. I had brought it with me, unsure if I'd use it. I looked around the house and said softly, "You were the place they thought they won." Then I dropped the key in the sink and walked away. Outside, Julia blinked. "You're not keeping it?" I smiled. "No. I don't want to live in a victory parade built on ruins. I want a new beginning. Not a shrine to survival." Later that night, I emailed Nora. Sell the house. Use part of the money to start the Eleanor Grace Foundation. For single mothers. For betrayed women. For women like me. Let that house do something good before it crumbles into another bad memory. The reply came within an hour, on it. And it's a damn fine idea. The next day, I took Eleanor for a walk. Leaves were turning gold. She reached out her tiny fingers to grab at a falling one, and I laughed, catching it for her. I whispered, "You're never going to grow up in anyone's shadow, baby girl. Not your father's. Not your aunt's. Not even mine." That night, in the quiet of the nursery, I held her and told her something I hadn't said out loud yet. I'm ready. Not just to move on. But to begin. To breathe in a life that had nothing to do with pain. To be the author of a story no one else could rewrite. Because revenge had already served its purpose. And now, it was time for peace. Before I begin, if this story made you feel something, if it reminded you of a time you were betrayed, or a time you rose when no one thought you would, please like, share, and subscribe. I want to know, where are you watching from, and what's the one truth no one could take from you? It was Eleanor's first birthday. The house was filled with balloons, soft music, and women I now called family: Julia, Marissa, a few mothers from the foundation, and even Nora, who brought a cake shaped like a butterfly. Eleanor giggled as she smashed frosting into her tiny fists, and the room erupted with laughter, not sadness. Not silence. Just joy. The woman who had once cried on a bathroom floor over 2 pink lines, she no longer lived here. The woman who had once been replaced, erased, betrayed by her own blood, she had become someone new. Someone whole. After the party, once the laughter faded and the sun dipped behind the trees, I tucked Eleanor into bed and sat at my desk with a blank page in front of me. It was time to finish the baby book. I flipped to the last page, the one titled "A Letter to Your Future." And I wrote, "Dear Eleanor, you were born from chaos, but you are not its product. You were the truth that outlived every lie. The joy that bloomed in a field scorched by betrayal. You saved me before you even knew my name. One day, you may hear stories. About your father. About your aunt. About how you came into this world wrapped in scandal. But here's what I want you to remember: you were always mine. Not because of biology, but because I chose you every single day. I carried you, protected you, fought for you, and loved you without conditions. Your name, Eleanor Grace, wasn't given lightly. It was earned. It is a promise. That no matter who tries to take what's yours in life, you'll rise. And when you rise, you won't scream to be seen. You'll move with quiet power. like your mother did. And if anyone ever dares to doubt who you are, just smile, like I taught you, and say, my name was never theirs to steal. Love always, Mom. I closed the book, placed it on the shelf above her crib, and exhaled. This wasn't just the end of a story. It was the beginning of a legacy. A legacy not built on revenge, but on reclaiming every piece of myself, one chapter at a time. The end.